Welcome to Opinion Havers, a movie podcast for people with bald eagle t-shirts. I'm Cody.
And I'm Tyler.
Tyler's the big one. This is the good one. This is the one I've been waiting for. What did we watch?
We watched Blue Valentine. You know, I wanted to make a joke about it, and I can't. I'm too...
You're too broken?
Yeah.
You're too hurt? Do you want to give the... I'm sure not everyone's heard of this one. Do you want to just tell people what it's about? A little quick synopsis?
I can try, I guess. It's a movie about a married couple and their struggles and stuff, and cuts between when they were falling in love versus current time and how things changed. Oh boy.
Oh boy.
It's good times.
Great job. Great job. So, I gotta tell you, I love this movie. I love it. I was happy to revisit it. It's this, there's all kinds of movies we watch. And if we started this podcast so that I could talk to people about movies that I never got to talk to people, I've only met like one or two people or talked to one or two people that have seen this. So I'm ready. This is a movie you have to talk about. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so I'm so glad that I made you do this. I made you watch it. And I'm excited to talk about it. I think it's a great movie. What's your first impression of it, Tyler?
I mean, it's one of those movies that I'll be honest, like, I think they did a great job making the movie. There's not really, like, there's nothing to the movie, though. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like if I was like, we're going to make a movie, we're going to call it Jeff. And we're going to find a guy named Jeff, we're going to film 2 hours of Jeff's life, and we're going to release it. And it's like, yep, you did a great job filming Jeff's life for 2 hours.
Yeah. So you're saying for better or for worse, you didn't like it?
I'm conflicted on it.
Wow. All right. That's fair. That is a fair look. Let's see if we can't get you some direction by talking through it.
All right.
This is the kind of movie you got to get up right in those guts. You got to really go for it. And I'm ready to go if you are. You know what I'm saying? I'm ready to just do it.
I'm always
Let's do
ready.
it. You and me, Tyler. Let's be a family. Let's do it.
Let's do
Let's
it.
go for it.
You just hop on in here, Cody, and let me drive you to sad Spoiler Town, to the sad part of Spoiler Town. All right, we're just going in it. It's old beat up 86 Honda Civic. Did they have Civics in 86? Probably. They've been around since the 1870s,
Maybe.
Right? All right.
I don't know.
When
I
they
wouldn't
invented
say they weren't.
civic councils, that's when the Honda Civic popped into existence.
Yeah,
as a counterpoint to the Civic Council, right?
So people could get to the council.
Exactly.
You gotta take your Civic to get to the Civic Council.
Hop in my 1896 Honda Civic. And we're just gonna cruise on down to sad Spoiler Town, USA, where everybody is just a little bit sad, but not sad enough to really ruin your day, just enough to bum you out,
Yeah. It's like when you see a worker taking the smoke break at the DMV, you're just like, oh man, it's a rough life, It's a rough time happening over there. But I'm going to McDonald's for lunch, so we're gonna put that away. We're gonna bury it. We're gonna forget I saw it. We're gonna move on.
Yeah.
Tyler, do you want to go first? Or go second? Want to go first? Or want to go second?
I can go first. I could,
You're gonna go first.
I'm gonna. I got a timer
right.
pulled up and everything, so.
Well, then I'll let me know when you're ready.
Oh, are you still talking? Can I hit start now? Oh, okay. Don't now hit start. You can't talk now. It's happening. We're going. All right, Cody. Here we go. This movie, it's just the Notebook it's just the opposite of the Notebook, right? That's all it is. It's like you got the note. We're spoiling it, Cody. On the one side, here we go. Spoilers for the Notebook is fine. All right, everything turns out fine. Ryan Gosling, he's in the rain. He's wearing sweaters. What's the sweater made out of? Boyfriend material, right? Classic meme, okay? So over there, it's like, will they get together? They don't. But then they do, and they live happily ever after. Here's what would have happened had they gotten together, Cody. All right? It gets bad. Ryan Gosling starts to smoke. His hairline recedes. If we all know one thing, it's that one way to pick out a loser, a failure in life, it's if their hairline is receding, Cody. Look at my hairline. It's powerful. It's strong. That's how you know I'm a winner, all right? You know? We both know that's right. Nod your head, Cody. You're nodding your head. You know that's the way to do it. That's the way to pick them out of the crowd. All right. So they start with this, and I'm like, the little girl, she comes in and she's like, Dad, oh, wake up. You know, they got out, and I was like, oh no, something's missing. The little girl they kidnapped has escaped. They got to hunt her down now. Ryan Gosling, he's a child predator, but he's nice to the child and he never molests them, you know? Because that would be a movie that someone would make with Ryan Gosling in it, right? You know? The good child predator. The one that kidnaps and enslaves a child because he cares, all right? Not because of anything weird. How dare you? That's Ryan Gosling. You're slandering. But it's not. It's just the dog. All right. So I was like, okay. So no, we're fine. We're fine. It's just their dog. All right. It's fine. You know, not child kidnappers. Cody, when I tell you the amount of times I thought this is when it happens, this is when somebody's about to kill themselves. All right. This is when it goes from like, oh, this is a normal family in America to, well, boom, dead. Tragedy has struck. You know what this movie did not give me? Did not give me that moment of like, oh, but they could have worked it out. No, they're like, no, you freaking nerd. They don't work it out, all right? If one of them had taken that way out and one of them had ended it, then you could have believed. You could have believed in love, all right? You could have believed in life after love, all right? But you can't now. You can't because this woman looked Ryan Gosling in the eyes and said, I can't do this anymore. Cody, can you imagine the gall of a woman to look a Ryan Gosling in the eyes and say, I want a divorce, all right? Nobody, no woman in their right mind, no man in his right mind would look Ryan Gosling in his eyes and say, I don't want to do this anymore, right? No, because you want to do that all the time. You know what? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pull up a picture of Ryan Gosling. I'm just going to look at his face. Oh, he's smiling. He's happy. Cody, he's happy. He's a lovely man. All right. Was I sad that his dog died? Yeah, but he cried about it. He showed that he feels, Cody. Gosh, why are all of his pictures song to song? It's 2 pictures of song to song. Oh my gosh. All of his IMDb pictures are just of his DVDs. It's just of DVDs, Cody. I hate it. I hate Ryan Gosling now. I'm over it. I want a divorce. All right. I'm over Ryan Gosling. I can't do this anymore. I can't stand the way he treats me. Okay. But like the flashbacks though, it was a very touching love story though, right? So you know, it was like I liked that part. It was good. You know, it was touching. He was there. He was nice. He was a fast talking, smooth talking scat man or whatever. You know, he was in there. He was talking his way into stuff. You know, but then that gets old after a while. You know, we've all had that friend that's like, no, let me talk at you for a second, all right? And then he goes from, like, beginning, you know, early Blue Valentine, Ryan Gosling, to Parks and Rec John Ralphio real quick, all right? John Ralphio, you know, come here. I can hear you just fine. No, come here. Come here, let me tell you, all right? Let me tell you something. Come here. You know, don't let yourself become John Ralphio, all right? That's what you need to understand. Don't go from Ryan Gosling to John Ralphio. Cody, look at me. Don't do it. Okay? You go from Blade Runner to Sonic real fast. All right? That's the difference between those two things, okay? Their little girl, she was so sweet. They were doing stuff. And I felt like I honestly, Cody, let's be real with you right now. I felt like Ryan Gosling, he was trying, but also like he was like, I'm going to do what I think a dad should do and not like actually care about my spouse.
All right, Tyler, I'm gonna cut you off right there. Let me tell you, Blade Runner to Sonic. Tyler, your time's up. All right, your time is up. It's over, and I'm going now, and I'm starting it, and you can't stop it. Yeah, no, it's a great movie. You're right about like it is like reverse Notebook, right? And I think one thing I like so much about the movie is every romance movie is so much like, are they gonna get together? They're not. Oh no, they are. They misunderstood each other. How will they ever get over it? They talked about it. Look, we're back together. Isn't that sweet? Which is fine. Like that's we all enjoy a good romance movie, good rom com every now and again. But I like that this one is like, hey, what if it was bad? And you think about like how many relationships do end and how many divorces happen. You're like, how does it happen? And I kind of like that this breaks all that down. It gives you that sweet beginning, but you're like, hey, if you don't set up your relationship well and work on it, and if you're not together on everything, then this can happen. You can fall out of love and it can go bad. And here's what I like most about the movie. It is perhaps like the most cathartic film I've ever watched. Like, I watch this movie, I feel low, I feel feelings, and makes me really confront my humanity in that way. And I think it's so great in that way. Let me tell you, this movie started, they lost Megan. I didn't remember that, but I was like, Megan. And let me tell you, my animals could not handle it. They like recognized that someone was calling for a lost animal. They heard my wonderful audio setup, and they were both perked up, like looking around at the speakers. I'm like, guys, chill. A movie is happening. No one is lost. We're gonna be okay. They couldn't handle it. I was surprised. Yeah, it's hard to watch. It's a hard movie to watch because you see how they start and you see that they do love each other. But as I like too that as the movie goes on, you realize like, well, it wasn't like they were two well-adjusted people falling in love with each other and deciding to set out. As the movie goes on, you realize like, oh, it wasn't like this perfect romance. It was, there's a pregnancy that happens and it's not his, and she wants an abortion. She doesn't get an abortion, and he decides like, no, like we could do this together. Let's do it. And so it's like, okay, like that is a sweet idea that they would do that together, but it also isn't that strong of a foundation. And when you see where he comes from and where she comes from, like they're both kind of damaged goods, and doesn't, one and two doesn't always make three if you don't add it up right. That's what I'm saying. This movie, Ryan Gosling says no homo in this movie at one point, and it made me real happy. I was like, oh, remember we used to say that? You guys remember that? Those are simpler times, Simpler times, easier times, more offensive, better times. You know what I'm saying? I couldn't believe. I just think this movie is very accurate to real life, because there are people in bad relationships, and there's also moving companies. I loved their portrayal of him working in a moving company, and he like has like way too many boxes stacked up, and like one's on his shoulder, and like tips over, falls, and the guy's like, "All right, you're in the industry now." Like, you're not a real mover until you drop someone's box of precious goods. I was like, yeah, this is what moving is really like. I do, yeah. They're not. I don't think either one of them are bad people, but they just aren't complement each other well, and they do bad things, right? Like Ryan Gosling is always drinking, always smoking, but he is like trying to be a fun dad, and you can even see at the beginning, like he is like a caring person, He shows that when he tries to set up what's his name's room for him. It's like, you're just a mover, you're just moving the stuff, and he's like, he unpacks a bunch of stuff for him and is really nice about it, and he's always, trying to be like the fun parent with the daughter, and you can tell he really loves her, and it's like not even his like biological daughter, so that's really sweet. But to your point, he's being Sonic when Michelle Williams doesn't want Sonic. She also wants like a husband, So kind of interesting to see like where they split apart. Let's talk about meatloaf. We didn't eat meatloaf a ton growing up, but we did on occasion, And let me tell you, what goes on meatloaf? Ketchup or, you know, some sort of a ketchup based sauce. These monsters, they go to dinner at Michelle Williams' parents' house and they have a meatloaf with the brown sauce on top. What was that garbage? Why would you ruin something so quintessentially American as a loaf of meat with ketchup on it with brown sauce? I was offended. I don't know about you, but I was like, this is why they're sad. This is why things are bad right now. We got brown sauce loaf.
I gotta cut you off about the brown sauce. Here's the thing.
Did you clock the brown sauce, or was that just me?
I did not, but here's why I don't find it offensive. What is a meatloaf but just a giant Salisbury steak, right? And you would put brown sauce on that?
Yeah, that's true.
People put brown sugar into the ketchup on the top. You ever done that? Make a glazed brown sugar ketchup?
Yeah.
Glaze the top? Or are you one of these monsters that just has the bare meatloaf coming out of the oven? All right?
It's a naked loaf. Vibing.
If you don't glaze the top of that loaf, you don't love your family. That's a fact. I'm sorry, you know.
That's true. That's true.
But
oh yeah.
Oh, were you about to say something funny? I was about to get serious for a second.
No, you go ahead.
So, I think the core issue, right, with these two people, right, is that like he tries to be a caring person and tries to, you know, do what he thinks is best, but the problem is like, and I've been guilty of this before too, you know, even in my marriage where it's like you think, well, all right, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to figure out what the issue is, and we're going to, you know, I know how to fix it. We're going to go away for the weekend or do this or do something fun, you know, or relax. You know, don't worry about it or something. And I know, like, a lot of guys are guilty of trying to fix it. And that's really the issue, is that he was always like, I'll fix it, or I can make it better, or I'll, you know, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Why are you stressing about it? And it's like, it's, you know, you just got to, it's different. You know, like, we're both married now. And I'm sure you've probably run into the same thing where it's like, there's times where you're like, oh, yeah, like, I really have to take into account, like, another adult's opinion on everything. I can't really make decisions the way I could, you know, months or, you know, a couple years ago for both of us at this point, you know?
Yeah.
Where it's like, I could just decide I want to do a thing, and now it's like, well, now I need to involve other people, and it's a much bigger deal. And he seemed like he never really got to that point where he realized he needed to, he always saw himself as like, I'm here to protect and take care of you, and not like we're partners in this. And they had very different goals. Like she even says, like, there's a conversation where, you know, you could tell, like, maybe it bothers her a little bit that like, maybe, because I feel like everybody stresses about money. Even if you're not stressed about money, you're like, there's a part of you that wishes you had more. You know, this is kind of part of it, right? Even if you're fine and well off, like, but it's more like she looked at him and saw, like, him being a painter. It's like, well, it's not like you could do better. Like, you're, you know, like, you could smooth talk your way into anything. Like, why are you a painter? And he's like, because this is all I have to, this is like the bare minimum I have to do to be able to afford the house and the food and everything. And then I can come home and be a dad. So he's like, priorities was being a dad, and her priority seemed more focused outside the home, and his was more focused in the home.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting too, because, like, you know, he talks about, like, don't I deserve, like, a little affection? Like, he does want that relationship with her, but I think she's so far gone where she's like, she's not in love with him anymore, you know? And so him trying to be like, hey, let's do this thing, let's do this fun thing, let's go out, let's go away for the weekend, and she's saying she doesn't want to do that. She's like, hey, I'm on call, like, it's far away, I don't, you know, like, she's giving all these signals like, this is not what I want to do, but he does, like, drag her out to make her do it. You know, it's that thing where they aren't on the same page, you know? And, like, maybe, you know, maybe it was a matter of communication. Maybe it was like, hey, it's not just, right, like Ryan Gosling, we got to get out of the house. You're like, that's not necessarily the problem with your relation. You know, you guys aren't on the same page. Right? You're not working towards the same goals, kind of like you talked about. Yeah. So it's like, you can't just say, hey, we're going out. Isn't this nice that we're out? And it's like, well, she doesn't want to be places with you, really. Like, you know, so I was being in a different place with you going to be better But it's like, yeah, you guys aren't on the same page with that. Like maybe you need to plan it better. Maybe, maybe weekend she's not on call. Maybe you get her clearance where she wants to go. Like he's just like, oh, I got a gift certificate to sex motel. You're like, oh, that's not where she wants to go. She doesn't want to do sex anyway. So it's just, it's they're very much on different pages. So it is interesting to see them, like when they're getting together, it's like them getting on the same page, right? And then you see like, oh, let's fast forward 6 years and see what it looks like. It's like, oh yeah, you're not on the same page anymore because but it's interesting, right? Because I think this movie's just really well written in that it gives you so many pieces as you go to put. That's what I like a movie that's kind of like a puzzle you get to figure out. And this one's such a good example of that because you're going back and forth. It starts out and you're like, okay, well, who are these people? What's their deal? And you see them as younger people getting together and you're getting all these pieces of what's up with them. And it goes into so much detail. I really enjoy that. But you see the details where it's like, oh, okay, when they decide they're going to be together and her family, who's like pretty damaged, like the dad's kind of a jerk and, she doesn't have great taste in guys and so she brings him home and it's like, okay, I guess this is pretty serious. And they're asking him all these questions and you realize like maybe she hasn't thought this through all the way too. Cause it's like, oh, you didn't finish high school. Oh, your parents aren't together. Oh, what are your goals? And he doesn't have, it's like, okay, well, which is not that there's anything wrong with that, but she is a very bright student who wants to be a doctor. So you're like, oh, you got this guy who hasn't finished high school and you have someone who is really prioritizing education and wants to be a doctor and wants to go to 8 years of school. It's like, okay, well, those are very different goals. And not, like, okay, if he's going to be the stay-at-home dad and she's going to be a doctor, you can totally make that work or, whatever arrangement you need to make. But I don't feel like they ever fully, obviously it's like she wanted to be a doctor. Okay, well, she became a nurse, which is fine, right? You get pregnant in the middle of college. Like, I don't blame anyone for being like, okay, let's adjust those goals. But, right, it just doesn't seem like they made that plan for, hey, okay, well, how about I focus on school? You'll do your, like, okay, I'll go to school during the day. You watch the kids. You'll work nights doing painting. That's when I'll watch our kid. It's like, what's our goal? And you never see them. It feels like they kind of fell into the situation and then they rode it out for 6 years. And you realize like, okay, yeah, we didn't have a journey we were both on,
Well, yeah. And I think that seems like kind of like a huge disconnect with him too, right? It's like I think fell in love with her, right? Whereas I think for her, it was more like he was a decent guy who was there when the father of her child was a terrible person. Mm-hmm. And it's like, yeah, you were the other option that I had. And so I think, I just imagine how different it would be like if he was just like an accountant or something. I think a lot of their issues would still be there. It would just be more, they'd be less like white trash yelling at each other and more passive aggressive, like middle class.
Her drinking wine in the corner, glaring at him and him, like, ignoring that or, whatever it is.
So it's like
not being home enough or, I don't know, some other aspect of it.
I think, it's something that I know, like, Tiffany and I, we got married real fast, but like we discussed everything before. And one of the things we did discuss was, I wanted to make sure she didn't feel like how I feel like, what's the character's name? The wife in the movie. Like it always felt
Michelle Williams.
Michelle Williams, yeah. Like
I don't know her character name.
It seemed obvious that the core
Cindy,
yeah, the core of her character, her issues with Ryan Gosling's character was that she felt she had settled, and he felt like this is it. We're living happily ever after. But at the same time, being like, well, this isn't like easy street. Like I was, like he kind of I think expected. You fall in love, you have your love story, and then live happily ever after, and that didn't live up to it. So he turned to smoking and drinking and those things to deal with it. And that just made it seem more to her like, well, I just settled for this loser that was there for me in a hard situation, whereas here's the guy that I could have gone with that he's a bad guy. Anybody who chews gum with the back, like at the back of your jaw, you know what I'm saying? Like you chew it with your tongue and your back molars, not like chewing it with your jaw and your mouth closed like a decent human being. But like, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to. If you chew gum like that, you're a terrible person, and I think you should be, what's the word for, what's neutered? Spayed? What's the human version of that?
Sterilized.
Sterilized. You shouldn't be allowed to breed. You should be sent off to a penal colony. That's what I think.
A lot of people, they talk about body language, you know, and learning from that. Just give someone a stick of gum. Watch how they chew it. That's all you need to know.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Hey, if you're dating, if you're looking to hire someone, whatever the situation may be, slap down a stick of gum and you'll get the info you need, you know?
Yeah. Like everybody thinks I'm a real chill person. You hand me a stick of gum, I have sucked every ounce of flavor out of that stick of gum in 45 seconds flat. And I have to spit it out because it's just mush at that point. It's just nothing. And it's like there's nothing really that showcases that you have anxiety boiling under the surface than realizing, oh my gosh, I just chewed this stick of gum like 800 times in a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
But like,
well,
seeing him, like, he was fine, like well off, it seemed like just, you know, it again showed, I think it goes to her feeling like she settled because all she saw was him in that, right? But he comes across as, well, he looks better. He doesn't have the receding hairline, right, Cody?
Mm-hmm.
I'm kidding. Cody, no. Cody, don't be sad. Cody, you're a winner, Cody.
Stop.
Cody, has anybody ever told you you look like Ryan Gosling?
Maybe not, you know? We'll never know. I mean, I'm sure if they saw this movie, they'd be like, yeah, Ryan Gosling. But, you know.
I mean, Cody,
the
you're
latter
blonde.
Half.
You have
That's true.
facial hair.
That's
and
true.
you're wearing glasses much like Ryan Gosling does in some movies.
Amazing. That's true.
So
I've seen him with glasses on.
To me, boom, Ryan Gosling. There it is. I'm
go.
looking at him right now.
I have a question for you.
Yes?
This made me think, who's going to be the fun parent? What do you think? You or Tiffany?
Okay, here's the thing. I think it's going to be me, but I also think, you know, you asked the same question, which one's going to emotionally scar the child more? Also me. That's the thing, you know. I've told Tiffany multiple times, I'm like, there's going to be times where you're going to have to look me in the eye and be like, you need to stop. Because I will ruin these children if you let me just go for it.
Yeah.
Like, I will talk to them like they're grown adults with high self-esteem when they're little kids. And it's like, you need to shut that down.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
That being said, because here's the thing, Tiffany, I think, will be better in our relationship at saying no to things or being like, well, maybe later. You know, she'll be better at saying, we can't go to McDonald's now. Well, McDonald's is a bad choice because she'll always want to go to McDonald's. She'll use the kids as an excuse to go to McDonald's. She'll be better at saying, no, we'll do it next week. Whereas I'll be like, yeah, you know, why not? It's like, because the bank's coming tomorrow to take away our home because you keep taking the kids to freaking McDonald's. That's why.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny because I think Bailey is like the fun parent. Like she's always like trying to play with kids, you know. Mm-hmm. And we are in nursery now, which means we watch in church. So we watch the kids who are 18 months to 3 years old. Right. So we watch all the toddlers. She is very much like the fun person. So I get dragged into being the fun person, you know. So I help with the fun, but she is very much like the instigator of the fun. But I think it's the same thing you talked about where she is very much the one to like, even with her pets, like she spoils her pets absolutely. You know, like gives Bindi way too many treats all the time. And I have to be like, hey, let's dial up, you know. I want Bindi to be healthy too. Like she can be happy and healthy, you know, versus just, you know, like I don't want my dog to like suffer health issues because we're spoiling them too much, you know? So I think we'll have to find that balance where I'm much more like in the long term, like, okay, we can do this, but what precedent does that set? You know, like how can we dial that back a little bit and be like, oh, we'll do this later. We'll do this next time. Or let's do this instead because this will be fun, but I'm not going to ingrain any terrible habits in you, you know? Yeah. Or I think Bailey's much more like, this will be fun. Like, I don't want to deny them anything. So we're going to do this.
Yeah. Here's the question. All right. Here's the real question. Which one? Okay. I'll give you two scenarios here. You tell me which one is the real fun parent, right? So there's one that you'll say, you go and you say, can I spend the night at my friend's house or can my friend stay over?
Mm-hmm.
And they will say no, but we can plan to do it, like next week or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like someone who will let you do fun stuff, but it needs to be like planned, or there needs to be something, if they had planned for the possibility of that person staying over, sure. But if they didn't, it's a no-go. Versus the parent that's like, sure. But if you're like, hey, can Billy stay over next week? Is like, I don't know. Go ask the other parent. Like, I could say yes to this right now. In the moment, down the line, if you're wanting to like do something big for your birthday, I don't know. Maybe not. Like, so it's like one is like knee jerk will say yes, but when they plan stuff out is very keen to say no. Versus one that will say yes to planned things, but no to instant things. Which one's the real fun parent?
Fun parent. I mean, look, kids don't give a hoot about plans. You know what I'm saying? Like if I'm like, hey, in 2 weeks I have it on the calendar, Wednesday evening we're going to Chuck E. Cheese. Versus the one who's like, we're having pizza for dinner now. That's the fun parent. For me, that's what I think. Like I think the kid is like, I want this now. If you're going to give it to me, then you're my best friend. That's what I think.
Then I'm definitely the fun parent.
There you go. I mean, is everyone more responsible? Perhaps, but Bailey's that way too. It should be like, should we do this? And it's like, no, we shouldn't. We definitely shouldn't. But you said it, so we're doing it. Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I love that scene in this one because it's pretty early on, right? Like Michelle Williams just like throws some water into some oats and is like, here's breakfast, kid. And she's like, I don't want to eat that, obviously. And Ryan Gosling's like, oh, well, we're pretending to be panthers, right? So let's put the raisins on the table and eat it like we're a panther. It's like Michelle Williams is like, now you're making a mess. But Ryan Gosling is like, yeah, but I'm getting her to eat something. Like she's at least eating, something. And she's having a good time doing it, right? Yeah. So it's like, okay, what's better? Would you rather have your kid be civilized and not eat the thing? Or do it's like, there's different approaches to parenting, but you just see how different they are in that. She's like, oh, you're making a mess. Like, now I have 2 kids in the house, whatever. But it's just sad because you see Ryan Gosling is like, yeah, but he wants to spend time with the daughter and have fun with the daughter. Whereas Michelle Williams just seems like she's like stressed about everything, about like the money and about the mess and about getting to work. And she just seems like she's very disappointed in so many things.
At the end of the day, though, which one do you think was not the fun parent, but which one of those two do you think was the better parent?
My thing is, I just didn't see Michelle Williams as a good mom, honestly. And like, maybe that's just the limited scope of the movie, just because like, it didn't seem like she had any, it was her daughter, and maybe she felt bitter because it was a kid from another dude who was a jerk to her, I don't know what was behind that, but it seemed like she was so structured that it just seemed, I don't know. I just think kids, right? We have this gift where we live in a country where kids can have a childhood. They don't have to grow up fast because of circumstances if you don't want them to, and like, so I was like, hey, you have a chance to give this kid a great home and they get to be a kid and enjoy things, and to have her always, it just thinks when it's like one parent's always trying to have fun, the other one's always shutting it down, like that's just a bad place to be, because the kid never knows when they can have fun and when they're doing something right or wrong, because one parent is encouraging them to have fun. The other one is saying like, this is not, we just got to get things done. You're like, do you? Got to eat breakfast, so why not have fun doing it? That's how I feel, because I don't know. I feel like we grew up, and I mean, this is definitely on my mind because I've been doing kids at church, watching the kids at church for a while now, almost a year, I guess, in different age groups. But I feel like I grew up in an era of parenting where it was like, well, I said so you can't do it. Yeah. Like parents are like, well, I made up a rule on a whim that says don't touch that, and now you're touching it, so you're in trouble, and it's like, okay, I get it. Maybe you don't want them to touch it. Let's think through it. Why don't you want them to touch it? Can they touch it as long as they don't throw it? Can they touch it as long as they're not bothering anyone else? What if they held it and they were sitting down? Like, is that okay? Like I try to think of all those compromises of, okay, well, I want them to have fun, but how do we teach them like, hey, don't do it like that because you're going to bug people, or you can't mess with that because that's going to disrupt everything. But you can play with it there, or you can play with this, or let's do this thing instead. And so whenever I see the parents that are just like, don't do that, or, they're always so stern with their kids and they're like, oh, you're messing up, you're doing this wrong. Like, stop doing this, stop doing that. It's like, okay, well, that's not a way to raise a human being, I don't think. There's no empathy there. There's no sympathy. Like, you're not going to win that kid over. That kid's not going to go to you with problems because they know you're just going to be like, you did it wrong. You were bad.
Yeah.
So that's how I feel. So that's how I try to be with the kids is, hey, okay, let's compromise a little bit. Like, because honestly, you're just saying don't do that because you don't want them to do that. But there's a reason, It's like if they're not bothering anyone, like, so maybe I let kids get away with more than a really strict parent would, but I also be like, okay, how do we contain this so that they're still having a good time and they understand the principle of, oh, okay, I can do this as long as they're not bugging anyone, as long as they're not disruptive, as long as I'm not hurting anyone else, So that's how I approach it. So I just think Michelle Williams didn't show any of that. It was very much like, oh, this is a pain. Now this is a problem for me to solve. Just don't do that. It's very much you're treating your kids like they're adults, Yeah. It's like, hey, it's their chance to be a kid, You can teach them stuff instead of just saying, don't do that. Don't do that.
Yeah. Which it comes back to where it does seem like, which I don't know. I don't know how, if you ever seen this. I've definitely seen this in a lot of young couples in a similar situation to this where one or the other of the parents, a lot of times I've noticed if in this situation, like if the mom got pregnant in this like set of circumstances or a similar set of circumstances where it's easy to view your family, like your kid and your spouse, as like, well, you guys ruined my life. Like, you guys are a constant reminder that I didn't get to go to medical school, or I didn't get to travel the world, or like all this stuff. Like,
yeah.
Like, I should be doing all this awesome stuff, and I'm not because of you guys. And now you're here pouring oatmeal onto the counter, and licking it off, you freaking psychos, And
right.
I've definitely seen lots of families and, like, had friends whose parents were obviously like that, where one or the other was like, oh, well, you obviously hate your family deep down. And I'm always like, why?
Yeah.
Why?
Why even do it then?
Why even do?
Well,
yeah.
That's what's crazy about this movie is that, like, starts with the dog dying, it climaxes with an abortion. They don't go through with the abortion.
Yeah.
And it ends with a divorce. Like, it is a very depressing movie, but it's interesting to see, like, the through line of, like, okay, well, yeah, you're in a rough situation. You did decide to keep your baby. Okay, so you made that choice. And so you have to think about, like, okay, am I living up to that choice? Am I making the most? I think it's easy. I've been learning about this a little bit in my class even. Like, it's easy to have like self-deception of everyone else is the problem. I'm not the problem. Everyone else is the problem. And she's very much in that box of, hey, you guys are making a mess. You guys are doing this. You guys are doing that. It's like, okay, but this is your family. So you don't win anyone over by having that self-deception of other people are the problem. I'm not the problem. So if you look at yourself and be like, okay, I did a bad job making breakfast. Like, that, I didn't actually make oatmeal. I put water in oats. Like, that was not oatmeal what you made. Right or wrong, that's something to think about. It's like, oh, I could have done a better job making breakfast. I could have sat with her and fed her and done something fun to make it better, or made something she liked, or talked to her about what she was going to eat. I could have, it's like, oh, I could be happy that they're eating something, and I could just have a paper towel ready to clean it up instead of being like, oh, you guys are making a mess. It's like, okay, well, do you want to help clean up the mess, or are you happy she's eating something at all? Are you happy that Ryan Gosling is having fun with your daughter, like, all the time? Like, every time you see him with her, like, they're always, he's holding her, he's carrying her, he's making jokes with her. Like, are you happy about that? Can you find a way to be happy about that? So just something to keep in mind, because, like, right, when you put yourself in that mode of, like, other people are the problem, and I never did anything wrong in the first place, it's like, okay, well, you did make a choice to have a family, even though you don't know this guy that well, even though maybe this isn't how you wanted to have a family, you did make that choice. Are you living up to it? Yeah. And because I think you just push other people away. when you approach life as other people are the problem, then you never actually find solutions, because it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Other people are the problem. You're always blaming them, so why wouldn't they be the problem?
Yeah.
So that's what I like most about this movie. It's such a realistic portrayal of, oh, okay, this is what can happen in a relationship. This is how a relationship gets bad. And that's like the thesis of the movie, essentially, because the director, his parents had a really messy divorce when he I think he was like 20 or he's either 12 or 20. I think he was 20. But I was like, oh, okay, you're with your parents your whole life, and then they get divorced. You're like, oh, it kind of shatters your world, right? So he's like, all right, I want to make a movie about that. And I think he did a great job, you know, putting that together and being like, oh, okay, I saw the good things about the relationship, and then I saw the bad things about it too. I love Ryan Gosling so much. But he's even like, okay, they're going to see Grandpa Art. Do you remember what you do when Grandpa snores? And she's like, hold his nose shut or whatever, you know, like. So he wakes up. I was like, oh, it's so great, you know. Just what a fun kid.
Yeah.
Who gets a gift certificate to a sex motel? That's my question. You can just get gift certificates for those. Who did he get it from? That's my question. He's like, I have a gift certificate, or was that just a joke? Was he just joking, or did he actually have a gift certificate for a sex motel?
Well, I imagine so. There's lots of those kinds of motels down where in like the Southwest where like Tiffany's from.
Yeah.
You know, in like Arizona and stuff. And there it is the joke that it's like, you know, they're kind of sleazy hotels, but they are also like lots of people go to them just as like a, hey, wouldn't this be fun? Because it's like some of the rooms are pretty cool, you know, like
so it's like kind of like a kitschy,
but they are
campy
like,
thing, you know.
Yeah, but at the same time, they're just kind of like rundown buildings in the middle of nowhere. So I mean,
yeah,
like it is funny because it's like, yeah, there's people there, but like I don't think people go like the ones that we've gone to anyway, or seen, or driven past, or like, you know, looked at to go to, have never struck me as something you would take, you know, a lady of the night to. But it's something you would take your spouse to when you're like, hey, we're gonna go away for a long weekend, and we have $250. Let's go stay in this room, you know.
Yeah.
Let's go stay in this like motel in the middle of
even
nowhere.
like he gets there. It's a ridiculous room. It's the future room, right? So it's like a spaceship kind of thing, whatever. The bed rotates. So he's on the bed, like looking at her, and it's spinning around, and she just like rolls her eyes and like, I want to take a shower. You know, and you're like, that's hilarious. Ryan Gosling is spinning on a bed in front of you. This is a great time. You know, like if you aren't in your box of other people with a problem, this is annoying. That is also a very fun situation to be in, you know. So just it shows how far apart they are.
Well, let's be real.
Just
like,
something to think
we
about.
both. So I saw this a lot in people. We both went. I went for a little while, you know, and then I left because, you know, school's for nerds. Also, I got kicked out. Whatever. It's no big deal, Cody. But we both went to the same school for a period of time. I saw it a lot in couples there, where it's like one person really, like, they're capable of being an adult. They make adult decisions. They're responsible, and they do the things they need to do. But in terms of like what they enjoy and like how they have fun, does not really mature past the late high school, early college years. And it's usually usually it's the husband, and then the wife is like, no, we need to be like my stuffy parents from Salt Lake City or something, you know. And it's like, you don't need your parents were not happy. They were never happy. They never will be happy. Don't be like them. That's what I want to say to all you ladies. They were never happy. Your parents hate each other. All right. Given the option, they would kill each other in their sleep. All right. They just can't do it because it's too much to deal with. Okay. Like, have you ever met old people that it's like, why don't you get a divorce? And they say, because it's not worth the hassle. And that's the only reason. All right. I've had that said to me by an old person more than one. It's not worth it. That's what they say, is whatever. He'll be dead soon, or she'll be dead soon anyway. I don't need to deal with it now. So it's like, but it's always like, it's sad because at once it's like, I've seen times where that's happened where, you know, because there's a point towards the end of the movie where I would call it's like they reach the, you know, it's like the flashpoint. It's the point where it's like a decision has to be made. And either you're going to, I don't know if you, I went through it when I was deciding whether or not I wanted to ask Tiffany to marry me, where I had a moment where she had acted in a way that I did not like. And we were talking, and I had a moment where the phrase popped into my head where I wanted to say, I don't want to do this anymore. And I couldn't say it because I was like, I don't care how bad it gets. I want to do this forever. And I was like, that's the moment. And I feel like that's where a lot of relationships like this reach that point where it's like, you're either going to say, this is the issues I'm having. We got to work this out, or you're going to say, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the fork. And I like that they got to there and they picked us away.
Right.
You know, and he was like, let's work it out. But then, I mean, they did make a big deal out of it. There wasn't there was a big fight, but it was like a normal fight that a married couple could have. And then they went one way. Lots of people go the other way. And then sometimes you go one way and then you come back to that, you know. And you're like, well, okay, so we tried to work it out. We couldn't. Do we want to keep trying or do we want to call it, you know?
Yeah. I hear that. That's something I liked about my relationship with Bailey. Is like we had problems and we were both committed to working them out and communicating well. And I'm like, that's huge. And I've been in relationships where like that hasn't been the case, or just like, oh, I did something to upset you and you just are not going to forgive me for it. So I guess we're broken up, you know, or just like, I get it. That was, you know, it's one of those things like, hey, that's not my intention. I'm sorry I hurt you that way. Like, how can I make it better? How can we work this out? And it's just like, no, like you did too much. I don't even want to address it. You're like, oh, that sucks. You know, or like we've been dating for a long time and you know, we can't work past it, you know?
Yeah.
So that's hard. Right. I've been in a relationship with that where I'm like, we did all that building and all this working and it's not even worth it to fix for you, you know, like, whereas my relationship with Bailey is like, doesn't matter how small it is. And like most of the time it is something small, but it's like, okay, let's take a step back. What happened? What are you feeling? What am I feeling? You know? And it's like, oh, I really appreciate that. Cause I just think if you're going to be together forever, if you're going to spend your life together, you have to have that skill, you know? And some people, they get in like that, especially like, you know, if you talk about someone who goes to like a BYU school where it's like, they get that fun 2 months of relationship and they're like, oh, we're going to do this forever, obviously, you know? And they never have those first couple of fights where like, oh, how do we argue and are we committed to working it out, you know? So they get married really quick and then that causes problems later because like, no, you never figured out how to disagree and you never committed to, oh, this is what it's like to be in a bad spot with this person. And do we have what it takes to get out of that bad spot, you know?
Yeah. Which is why I always tell people whenever I'm like, how fast that I got engaged to Tiffany. Don't do that.
Right.
I'd say we discussed all of these things, that there are people who were like, we dated for 8 years. Then we got married and, you know, she wants to go to school and I don't. And it's like, did you not discuss that? That was second date discussions, my guy.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
So I'm like, don't do what we did.
Yeah.
But
it's funny because it is just like, you can have fun with someone and have good chemistry with someone, but you have totally different goals. And if you can't sit down and set goals together and make plans and be on the same page, and if you guys don't want to go in the same direction, why would you marry that person? If you're not having those conversations, it's not a good idea. And that's what's kind of interesting about this relationship, is that they hit that point at the beginning where he's like, hey, let's be a family. Like, let's just do it. It's like, okay, cool. That's fine to say. And that's really noble of him to be like, hey, no, I want to, you know, I do like this person a lot and you know, let's do it. But it didn't seem like at some point they didn't have the same idea of what a family is and what his role should be, what her role should be, and what they both want. And, you know, when you stop communicating that stuff, then you can see in the movie how it causes that relationship to break, you know?
Yeah.
This movie shot... Oh, go ahead.
Well, it's just interesting how, like, you know, even like towards the very end, like as their relationship gets worse and worse and reaches that decision point, you know, it's almost like, you know, she wants him to be meaner and more aggressive because it's almost like she's chasing what her parents had, you know, and that's always something that's strange to me when people who's like, your parents are obviously like, you grew up in a dysfunctional family. You know that, you acknowledge that. Why are you doing things to purposefully seek out that same relationship with your family now?
Yeah.
But it's like, you know, I guess the thought is like, if you're reaching the end of it and it like, where you're like, I can't do this anymore. You're like, well, they did it forever, you know, like they stayed together. So might as well give it a shot. Because that was also another thing where it's like, that was that break that I liked, that they had that, you know, in there where, you know, like when they were being intimate with each other, Cody, and she was like wanted him to hit her, and he was like, "No, I'm not gonna do that." Which, I sympathize with Cody. If I had
Stop.
a nickel, if I had a nickel for every
Stop.
time.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too because that's another thing you get a lot of hints at, right? Because when she goes to the clinic when she's younger to get her abortion, they talk about like, hey, how long have you been sexually active? She's like, I was 12. You're like, oh, that's young. And how many partners have you had? She's like, oh, 20, 25. Like, oh, that's
a lot.
A lot for someone who's like, she's probably a freshman in college or something, freshman or sophomore maybe. So just kind of crazy to be like, oh, okay, well, obviously, if you're sexually active that young, odds are you were kind of coerced into it or groomed into it. Like there's probably like a 16-year-old boy or 14-year-old boy that was like, oh, we should do that. I've heard a lot of stories, people where it's like, no, I was 12. I didn't like understand much about sex, and I was getting attention from a person, and they were like, oh, we should do this. And we're like, oh, what even is that? And it's like all of a sudden, like, oh, now you're sexually active, and maybe you didn't want to be, but now this is what you know. So it's just, that's a hard thing to deal with too. And you're like, oh, well, that really sucks. She had to deal with that,
Yeah.
So it's just like, okay, well, that makes sense why maybe that's how she interprets sex, because she was probably in some pretty bad relationships, and that's her thing. So it's just like, oh, well, that sucks. It's like they even interpret intimacy differently, right? Like she wants one thing, and he's like, no, that's not what intimacy is about. So just so hard to see, hard to watch. But once again, I think there's a lot of realism to that. And so that, it's so, I don't know, right? Like your average romance movie, you're like, oh, there's like a hot sex scene. Look how passionate it is and whatever, that is not how these work at all in this movie. It's like, oh, I'm like, I don't know. It's just, there's so much more realism and in a different direction than you'd normally see in a movie. And that's one thing I really appreciate about it. It's uncomfortable, you're like, oh, these people are not on the same page at all,
Yeah.
I did think it's shot kind of interesting too, because it's I think there's a lot of angles where it's like really tight shots, a lot of like handheld shots, like it's very intimate, where it's just like, oh, the frame is just Ryan Gosling's face or like Michelle Williams' like entire face, and they're disagreeing about something. And this movie was scripted, and there was a script, and the actors really liked it, but they did a lot of like improvising and off script stuff. So I don't know. Have you seen any of the fun facts about this movie?
I have not. I purposely have not looked because I know.
Well, okay. Let me run through a couple of my notes, and then we'll kind of run through the fun facts. So First off, like even though they are different and they're on the same page, there are those like little things even in the later part of the relationship that's like kind of sweet, where it's like, okay, Ryan Gosling wants to do sex in the sex motel, she does not, but he puts on their song and they dance a little bit together, and she doesn't smoke anymore, but she still takes a drag of his cigarette, and you're like, oh, it's sweet. You see where they came from, where it's like, okay, they do have this history together. Ryan Gosling, total stalker, like shows up at her grandma's nursing home, which is like not close, to be like, hey, so what's your daughter's name? You're like, oh, you're a stalker, but it's funny to hear him talk to the guys in the movie company. He's kind of like a hopeless romantic, and he has these ideas about what love is, and he is a caring person. So it's interesting to see that. I like that he like punches his leg to psych himself up to go talk to her when they're on the bus. Did you catch that?
Yeah.
He's like, thonk, thonk. I'm like, okay, here we go. I was like, look at you go. You got to do it. Yeah. You got to do it.
Yeah.
Trying to get psyched up. Give yourself a few slams. You're ready to go.
Yeah. I'm looking through the pictures, right, of some of just the screenshots of the movie, right? Mm-hmm. I like a shout out to the transformation they put Ryan Gosling through, because they, like young Ryan Gosling is Ryan Gosling. Like he's sweet, he's
full Gosling.
He's he's like, like, hey, I'm here. I'm gonna become friends with your grandma so that you'll like me. Like. Stalker, but he's hot, so it's hot. You know what I'm saying?
Right, like, so it's okay.
And then him, where it's just like, oh yeah, no, he's just kind of like trailer trash painter, but like a lot of guys like that. Like he's a fine dude and a good dad and all that. Maybe a little inconsiderate sometimes to what his wife wants, but other than that, like he's not a bad person.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just like I wonder, like it really just shows like part of the. Feeds into that, like, like they fell in love as two hot young things that wanted this romantic love story, and now they're here and they're very different people, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And like,
Yeah.
he's like most dudes falling apart as he gets older. And she's fine.
Yeah.
And she's still young and hot.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the question. How do they make a receding hairline on a person that doesn't have one? Do they just pluck out or cut their hairs to make it look like it? Because then you gotta, as Ryan Gosling, you then have to deal with having a receding hairline until your hair grows back, right? Or does he have a receding hairline?
I don't know what they did to that man, you know, but they did a great job.
You know,
I mean, you'd have to put on like a bald cap, right, with like that wig over it or something. I don't know, but it looks pretty real. I don't know what they did.
I'll do some zoom and enhance.
Do some,
yeah,
do some
zoom
zooming.
stuff.
I also had to know they're just like, she got him, you know, because it's just right. Like they're still like friends or not. She's like, can you come to the clinic with me to the thing? And then they're on the train home, and he's like, well, let's be a family. I was like, reeled him in. That's how you get him. That's how you trap a Ryan Gosling. You know, that's what you got to do. Yeah. I thought Ryan Gosling. I loved his pickup line. He's like, well, in my experience, like pretty girls are crazy, you know, because everyone laughs at their jokes even if they're not funny. I was like, it's pretty. I like the whole line of reasoning. It was like, you know, if someone was laughing at your jokes all the time, but they're not actually funny jokes, you'd go crazy. You know, like, yeah, sure, why not? Yeah. I clocked. I don't know if you clocked, but he's got a giving tree tattoo on him. Oh. So I don't know if you're familiar with the book, The Giving Tree, but it's about, you know, sacrificing everything and giving your all to someone else. So it's cute that he has that tattoo. Real sad it doesn't work out. So that's the end of my notes about the movie, and now I have so many fun facts, Tyler. You don't even know.
Give me the fun facts.
Okay, so first off, I told you kind of the inspiration with the movie, right? The director's parents had a messy divorce, and he was like, all right, well, I kind of want to make a movie about that. So they filmed all the past scenes with Dean and Cindy falling in love, okay? It took 3 weeks. And they were like, we made a nice little movie. Should we just release that movie? Should we just do that? Maybe we can just call it Valentine, and it would be nice. And then he's like, nah, let's not. So they had Ryan Gosling, Michelle Williams, and the daughter live together in a home. They had to live off of a painter's budget for groceries. Michelle Williams would go at night. She would go live with her kids because she had kids at the time. Mm-hmm. She dated some really famous. I forget who. So, So they were in a rented house for a month. They did grocery shopping, cooking dinner, and the director kind of helped. You know, was like, let's figure out your chemistry and how to pick fights with each other. So they lived together for a month, which is kind of crazy to think about. And that's where they got that character development and that chemistry for the bad part of the relationship. So also the director, so I kind of mentioned they had a script, but they did a lot of improvising on it. And so what the director would do is you'd be like, all right, I'm going to give Michelle Williams some notes on what Cindy wants in the scene. And then separately, I'll give Ryan Gosling some notes on what Dean wants, and they will be conflicting. So he'll be like, all right, Michelle Williams, do whatever you can to get out of the house. So you're going to start the argument and you're going to leave. He's like, all right, Ryan Gosling, whatever you do, don't let her leave and keep the conversation going. And so that's why you see her where she's like trying to turn away, and he's like, you know, he like locks doors and gets in her way, and he's like, no, can you just talk to me for a little bit? Like, I just want to talk about this. And she's always like leaving. And so kind of interesting. Okay. It was Heath Ledger. Michelle Williams I think her kids are from Heath Ledger. So they had the filming all ready to go and scheduled, but then Heath Ledger died, so like, we're going to give Michelle Williams some time. And so they actually delayed the movie a year or two. So I kind of said, right, they had conflict, you know, they had different directions they had to go. And so even in the scene where Michelle Williams doesn't want to tell him about the abortion, the director's like, all right, figure out a way to get her to tell you, you know? And so they had to improvise. And so that's why Ryan Gosling hops up on the fence, like he's going to jump over the bridge. So like that was just like, all right, I'm going to do this so that she'll tell me. So it's kind of interesting to think about, like, okay, yeah, they had the idea for the scene and they did have dialogue written at one point, but now it's just, you guys know each other really well now because we made you live together. So, you know, how would you get this person to do what you want? Yeah. What's up? What's your reaction to the first batch of notes there?
the first batch of notes or first fun facts?
Fun facts.
I think it definitely like helped it come across as more realistic. Like you say, like forcing them to spend enough time together that they would know how to push each other's buttons, you know, or like how to pick fights, and like giving them direction in such a way that, you know, it kind of instead, because I feel like that's part of the issue too, is like a lot of times when, especially with a really involved director, you end up having the problem where it's like it's two people but they're really thinking with one mind, you know, like the actors are doing their thing but you're being directed by one person. So it really helped build up that idea that these are two separate people that want different things, and like they deal with issues separately. Like that's something Tiffany and I've struggled with, that I want to sit there, I want to figure out the thing, you know, like I don't want to necessarily storm away or like, you know, end an argument that way. I want to be like, no, we're gonna figure out why we're upset and we're gonna fix it. And she's like, just let me go into the other room for like 5 minutes and I'll be fine, you know. So that's something that I had to learn really early on, is like it's much easier, and it's something where I've started doing even now, where it's like it's much easier to, if we're both really heated, just leave the argument and then come back in a few minutes and we'll be fine, you know. And like that's something that they're struggling with, and he never learned that. He never learned just let her storm off and then go talk to her in like 10-15 minutes, you know, and she'll be fine. So he's like chasing her around, and that, you know, which sometimes, you know, is a fine thing, and sometimes it just makes it worse and worse and worse and builds to where they got to, you know. So but it's learning to judge that in your, you know, like do you ever deal with that, you know, where like you guys deal with arguments differently and you had to adjust how you dealt with them?
we found a bit, because I'm not like a heavy thinker, but sometimes I need to like take a moment to think, because it's like, okay, I know I'm upset, but I don't quite know why, so I need to figure out, and I need some time to think about it. And Bailey never wants she doesn't want any space. He's like, no, we have to. So I think we do it mostly her way. I mean, I like to talk about my feelings anyway. I was like, I would rather talk through it and dissect it. But there are times where it's like, I don't have answers for you because I have not considered it long enough and I have not put it together myself. So we did have to like figure that out. But yeah, I mean, so basically we just sometimes we just have to talk through like, okay, what's going through my mind and what do I think happened? And that helps us piece it together. But we are a little different that way. Like I'm a little more of a thinker, and she is very much like, no, something's wrong. We're gonna sit here and we're gonna figure it out, you know?
Yeah.
So, and we had to do it a little bit too, because she would do the girl thing. That's kind of like, I'm upset. So, you know, where I was like, I'm going to act upset. I'm going to, you know, till you ask me what's wrong. So sometimes I still have to ask her, but other times she's just like, hey, I'm a little upset about something. You're like, okay, well, let's talk about it. So we've kind of had to compromise a little bit there. And it's like, hey, if you are upset, I would love to resolve it with you. But if you don't tell me anything's wrong, then it could be hard. And then I'm just picking up bad vibes, you know, and that's not good for me to like just get bad vibes thrown at me, you know. So there's been some compromise there of like, okay, how are we gonna get on the same page here so we can feel better?
I mean, it like there's the interesting thing is like them, like, you know, like it's always the classic advice, right? Is that the key to having a good relationship is communicating and like figuring out how best to communicate with your SO, your partner, your life companion, you know, and just kind of communicate. Like there's times when I'm upset by something that I'll just turn to Tiffany and be like, I'm upset about this. This is why, you know, like just tell her like, this is exactly why I'm upset. Like no argument, no nothing, no back and forth, no cold shoulder. Just like, this is what's going on, you know? And like, but then it's also so key to learn, you know, something that this movie shows so well is that like some people, like he's really good at talking and just wanting to discuss things and wanting like tell me what the issue is and we could talk it out, but that's not how like she wants to communicate it. So it's like a combination of him not doing it right in a way, and her not wanting to have that communication. But at the same time, it's not like she's like, well, I'm just written off this marriage already, because that guy, you know, like the doctor, like pretty like very obviously lays it out like, yeah, no, I basically want you to take this job at this other clinic I run or own with the intention that I will bang you at some point.
Right. Yeah.
And she's like, oh, well, I thought you know, I think that's something that she struggles with too, is like, she saw this as like, oh, you know, like, I wanted to be a doctor. He wants me to do this because I'm the best nurse. And then she realized, like, oh, he's just like every other, in her mind, every other man in her life that just
and she's
wants her.
propositioned all the time.
Yeah.
Even when she runs into the wrestler guy later on at the liquor store, he's like, oh, you're married? Are you faithful? And you're like, oh my gosh. You know, you're like, you know, she's always, all these skeezy guys are always presenting that to her, you know, and that sucks too. So.
Yeah. So.
Speaking of skeezy dudes, so the director did, one of the things he did to fuel the contention between them, he's like, Ryan Gosling, here's what I need you to do today. I need you to make a pass at Michelle Williams at the house. Do whatever you can to try to make sex happen. And she like hard rejected him, you know, so you're like, oh gosh, okay. So you can see where that's how they get from the turn from, oh, this is nice, look, I'm singing a song and you're dancing and we're just hanging around the streets of New York, you know, to, hey, I don't want anything to do with you, you know?
That's how you really separate the true great directors. Like, hey, you two people who I've tried really hard, like you are friends, you get along really well. Let me tear apart your relationship. Let me make you hate each other in real life.
Yeah, yeah. Same license plate. Their van has the same license plate as Jim from The Office, the Pennsylvania plate they've got. So, fun fact. And this is a good one. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
So the original rating for this movie was NC-17. And they went to appeal. They were like, hey, you're giving us some double standards on these sex scenes. These are no more graphic than other R movies are showing. I think you're just upset because ours are much more realistic, you know? And so they made the appeal and they considered it and they were like, all right, fine, we'll give you the R rating. So I thought that was interesting. There's 2 or 3. Yeah, I think it's 3. I mean, they are, I would say, they're not graphic in that, like, a lot of NC-17 ones is because it's like, no, you're just like showing genitalia, or like there's like a 20-minute sex scene, so obviously this has to be NC-17.
Yeah,
the scenes aren't crazy long or anything, but it is like very realistic. It's like the noises, there's like a cunnilingus scene, everyone's clothed, like you don't see anything, but it's like, no, this is happening, like it looks like, you know. So that's what they did, but I applaud them for like the realism they put in it, you know, because normally with the sex scenes, like, oh, we'll do like the kind of mood lighting and pan some angles around and whatever, you know, we'll show some nipple action and we'll be good to go, you know. And that is just not really the route they went with for this one. So I don't know, how'd you feel about making you watch those?
I mean, I felt like they were fine. I felt like, you know, like a lot of times in movies with sex scenes, I feel like they bank almost on the sex scene selling a certain number of tickets. And it did come across much less like, I feel like it's difficult, and this is the only movie I think I've ever watched where I'm like, okay, it's believable amount of nudity. Like, yeah, no, they would be naked in this situation, you know, versus like, let's have a prolonged sex scene where it's very passionate and everybody's spritzed with the bottle every 5 seconds, so everybody's real wet and dripping, but it's sexy dripping because it's just water, it's not real sweat. You know, and then the next morning when the girl gets up, she's going to wrap the entire king size sheet around her, and it's like,
yeah,
that would never happen. You ever gotten up after sex and wrapped a sheet around you, Cody?
Oh, you mean sex sheet? Yeah, it's hanging up on the wall. It's always ready to go. I love a good sex toga, and I will never say no to one.
So it came across as very realistic, and I appreciated that they didn't go like, you know, like a classic example, right? The most extreme in the other way is like Game of Thrones first season, where like HBO, like some executive at HBO said it was the first time they'd ever gotten letters asking them to tone down the nudity.
Yeah.
Because they were like, it's distracting, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. For sure. And I appreciate too, it just doesn't happen much in movies where you're like, oh, I'm learning something about these characters because of the sex scenes. And this one, it's very, you're right. It's like you see the wrestler's one, you're like, oh, he's like an a-hole and he apologizes. I'm guessing because the condom slipped off or something, you know, like because she does get pregnant or whatever. And then you know, and he's like kind of squooshing her, right? So just like, okay, this is bad. And then there's the one where like, oh, Ryan Gosling cares about her needs, you know, when they're young and they have their sex scene, you know, stuff like that. And then like the last one is like, oh man, these people are on completely different pages, because she doesn't want that with him. But she's eventually drunk enough, and he pushes her enough. She's like, okay, fine, but do this to me. And he's like, no, I'm not gonna. It's like, okay, it's part of the story, and it does something at least. And there aren't that many movies I feel like that do that. So good on them. I've got one here, note here that doesn't make any sense. Walter's wedding prior. I'm assuming I misspelled something. Walter's wedding. Oh. When they get married at the courthouse. So Walter's the old guy that he unpacks his room for him. He's really nice about that. Oh, yeah. Walter's picture is in the courthouse, his wedding photo. So you can spy that if you're eagle-eyed. I noticed it because I've seen this movie before. Da-da-da. So Michelle Williams had to improvise her joke on the bus when he's like, tell me a joke or whatever, see if it's actually funny, if you're crazy or not. And the joke, it's a great joke. The joke is, it's a pedophile and a kid walking in the woods, Yeah. And you walk in, the kid getting darker and darker. The kid gets kind of scared. And he's like, I'm getting kind of scared, He's like, you think you're scared? I got to walk out of these woods alone. You're like, oh no. Yeah, great joke. But you can actually hear, so it wasn't scripted or anything. You can hear the crew laughing, and they left it in the movie. But yeah, so she got the crew to bust up on that one. Yeah. Michelle Williams did get nominated for Best Actress, nominated for an Oscar. Michelle Williams is great, and she's in another movie in Cody's Corner. We'll see if it pops up. If it pops up, it's surely Destiny. But there's another very sad movie she is in, so we'll see. We'll see if we get there. But she does a great job. We like her. Good job. So the guy who directed this one also directs a Ryan Gosling movie called Place Beyond the Pines. Mm-hmm. I have some friends that love it. I liked it okay, but it wasn't my favorite. Pretty good movie. It's an interesting one. He plays a dude who robs some banks. Mm-hmm. And then he also directed Sound of Metal, which is on my list. Have not seen it yet. I think it's also on the Cody's Corner list. So see if that one pops up too. But I think he's a very good director. And I know he had to do he really wanted to make this movie. And he did a lot of documentary features and stuff to be able to raise enough money to get this thing going. So it took him quite a while. I think it was 10 years or so between when he's like, all right, I'm writing the script to, okay, I've got the money, I've got the people, we can get it scheduled, we can go.
I was surprised when I saw the budget because it comes across as a nice, a well done movie that had it doesn't have to have a huge budget when it's a movie like this because you only need it's not like you gotta
you can shoot it on location.
Yeah.
You can absolutely shoot it on location and yeah.
So I don't know if you saw or do you want to hazard a guess at the budget of the film?
I don't know if I saw it. Was it? I'm not sure. I have no idea. I mean, if I were to guess, I would say $7 million.
No, sir. Absolutely.
What was it?
It was $1 million.
Oh, that was it?
Yeah.
Gosh. It is amazing to see what you can do. What was the box office?
16.
30 million or something?
6
million?
16.6.
16. Okay.
So Wikipedia has a higher thing than IMDb, but Wikipedia's, does actually, it always has it referenced to pretty accurate numbers. So I'll go with that.
Yeah, for sure. My last note, I think something I just thought, it's not a fun fact, but I think one thing the movie does really well, because it hops back and forth, I think it makes it so much more heartbreaking. If this movie was just told where it's hey, nice love story, and as they get older, it gets worse and worse, I think it would still be hard to watch. But I think because you're going back and forth, they're young and they're in love, or they're young, they have so much potential, and then you go back and you're piecing together why it is so bad and why it is the way it is, and you see how it started and how it had potential and where it falls apart. That just makes it so much more heartbreaking because it pulls your heart up where it's oh, look, they're going to be a family. But then you're but the family sucks now. They're not happy, So you're going back and forth. And so, I don't know. I mean, there are some other lines I really liked. It's so sad because at one point Ryan Gosling was look, there's some guy and it's their dream to have the family, have the kids, and that's what they want. And that was never me. Was for some, never was for me. It's sad to see him say that, but he's but I have you guys in my life now, and I love it, and I've fallen in love with it, and I love being her dad, and I love this family. And you're oh, well, that is sweet, And so it's just sad to hear him give that speech, and in the same movie, she's I can't do this anymore. I don't want to do it anymore. And he's please, we can work it out. And he's nope, I'm done, And he gets in a fight with her in the doctor's office. He punches the doctor. He throws his ring away. They're like sitting there in the bush trying to look for his ring that he threw away. Like, just, and then even at the end, it's so heartbreaking to see like, oh, she wants to run after him and he's walking away and he's like, no, you gotta go to mommy. Like, I'm leaving. And so it's a sad one, you know? Yeah. And it's sad because it shows the good and the bad. And what a heartbreaker. But like I said, for me, if a movie can make me feel something, I think that is a credit to what a good film it is. And for me, I think that makes this a great film because I feel so strongly when I do watch it, and I sympathize, and I'm so sad for these characters and the struggles they're having. So for that, I'd say it's a great movie. Is there anything left unsaid before we slap a rating on this guy?
Well, I had one final thought. What kind of along the same lines as you were talking about with it jumping back and forth, right? Is so the Notebook, which is a famous Ryan Gosling movie, right? But it's like happily ever after. You know, they die snuggling in the bed. Spoilers. You know, like I wonder how much the director looked at that and said, "All right, so that's the fairy tale, you know, Nicholas Sparks book version of this love story." Like, and then, like you said, like him experiencing being like the child of a terrible divorce, you know, and all that, saying like, basically, you know, I wonder how much he took that, you know, to influence the time jumps and be like, this made that story all that more touching. Now, if we put more realistic film on it, because like I said, you know, they could have got to that point and then worked it out. There's lots of couples that do that, you know, get to the point, realize it is worth it to deal with this. I do want to deal with all this stuff to be with you. They just didn't. They went the other way with it. And I felt like they really are two sides of, one is obvious. I would say this is a better written, more realistic, more, you know, whereas the other one is more, you know, stereotypical fantasy novel and less like, let's portray a real love story, you know? But the same things that I think get people so in the feels with the Notebook, or like you said, it's what got people with this one, where you show them in the Notebook, you show it fall apart and then rebuild it, whereas here you show them build it up and then it fall apart. Yeah. You know, like as they're building up in the past, you show it falling apart in the present day, you know? And it's also more heartbreaking that it's like, it didn't even really last that long, you know? You know, like it's one thing when older people, like it's one thing when like when you're like 20 and your parents divorce, you know, only a loser would be broken up about that. But like if my parents decided they hated each other and got a divorce, like it would be far different than if when I was a kid and they did, you know? Right. So just is interesting. Like the more I thought about the two of them compared, the more I wonder how much he looked at that and said, I just want to make like, I want to take that and be like, this is what these love stories usually end up being in real life. You know, like more often than not, like the amount of people, because like I said, you know, Tiffany and I got married very fast. Like even you and Bailey got married really fast by a lot of people's standards, you know? Sure. Like, I don't know, you probably haven't had this because you guys dated for longer, but there's lots of people that'll just straight up be like, oh, so you guys are not going to make it, you know? It's like, all right, first off, you can go F yourself, dude. You've been divorced like 8 times. Like, I'm not a terrible person like you. That's not to say all people that have been divorced are terrible people. That person is a terrible person for looking at a young newlywed couple and saying, you guys aren't going to make it. That's what makes them a terrible person. So, you know, like, it's just, it is interesting that I do wonder how much they pulled from that versus, you know, just, you know what I'm saying? Cody, look at me. Do you feel what I'm saying in your ear holes?
I feel it right burrowed into my ear holes. Yeah, and I think if anything, this movie, like I said, it's very cathartic to watch, and I think it's very well done. But you know, someone like Bailey would not enjoy this movie because they don't end up together. It's not a happy thing, and that's how most romance movies are, and that's how they're sold. But I think this could be just as romantic if you take it as a cautionary tale. And it's like, hey, let's learn something from this, you know, whereas you don't learn much from a movie where it's just like, hey, they're not together. Are they going to get together? they're kind of together. They misunderstood each other. Now they've reconciled and they're going to be together, right? Not that there's anything wrong with the kind of movie, but I don't think there's much of a lesson to take except for communicate better. Because if you just, that's how you get over it. Anyway, so if you take this as cautionary tale, it's like, hey, what can I learn from it? I think there's a ton to learn from this movie, and it echoes, parallels a lot with real life, and there's lessons for all of us to learn. So,
yeah,
it's a good one. I love it so much. What grade would you give it, Tyler?
I'm gonna give it a solid B. That's what I'm gonna go for. Because I thought, it's a good movie. It's very realistic, like we've said. I see it's something where it's like I watched it and it made me think of one or two things that I do that I'm like, you know what, I want to try to do better in my relationship. And it also showed me several things and I'm like, well, I'm glad I'm not that terrible in my relationship. And it didn't feel like I'm watching, a made up couple. It really made it feel like you're watching a real couple's story and where they went right and where they went wrong. And, I liked it. I enjoyed it. I would recommend it to some people because I think it's a very powerful movie. Just how, even down to the kinds of people they are and how they treat each other. And even when she goes to get the abortion, how the doctors do that. And I know there are some doctors that aren't that gentle about it, but that's I think how most doctors that I've talked to approach it, where they're very much they're like, oh yeah, lots of girls call it off. Like I'm about to do it. The apparatus is going in. And they're like, I don't want to do this. And it's like, you have to be go slow and be ready. Because the second they say, I don't want to do this, you got to shut it all down.
Yeah.
And there's lots of times where they do that, And so I was like, that was kind of interesting. Because you see usually it's they just go into the building. And then at most you might get a cut to her on a table. And then it cuts back to him. But they're like, no, sucker. You're going to be here this whole time for all the harrowing experiences of these people.
Right. It's like the saddest pro-life movie ever. It's like, hey, she decides to keep it. And they're having a rough time. You're like, oh, man.
Which I felt like that was important for it because it's like she was there. She could have just been like, no, this is going to ruin my life. I don't want to do it. And her life would have taken a whole different direction. But she chose to keep it. Yeah. And then she chose to let it ruin her life. So it's like she made lots of choices. It's all about choices.
It is. Tyler, I'm honestly offended you gave this a B because I can't decide if I want to give it an A or an A+. The only thing that would keep me from giving it an A+ is that it's just there's some of those angles these are so tight in and it almost feels a little dated. It's almost taking me out of it, but I'm gonna stand by my guts. I think this movie is near perfect. I think it's fantastic. I'm gonna give it an A+. I did it. I'm doing it. I'm a bold man.
Good job.
If I look at the other movies that gave an A+, it would be offensive for me not to give this movie an A+. It's fantastic. It's graphic. It's adult. It's real. And it's sad, but it's so good. And if you want any of that in your life, you got to give it a watch.
Yeah.
That's what I'll say. I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, it's goody. You ready to pick the next one?
Oh, I'm so ready. I'm not ready because you have to do it because it hates me. But yeah, no, go ahead.
I have the device pulled up. I'm ready to divine the film.
Divine the film, Tyler.
Patterson.
Patterson?
Patterson.
Or Paddleton? Patterson.
It says Patterson.
I think those are both on there. Okay.
It says
I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it. It's just one on the list. So it'll be a journey for both of us. Isn't that great?
It will be great. I'm assuming it's going to be depressing and a love story about depression and sadness. Oh, look, I'm looking at the poster. It looks very much like a depressing movie about sadness.
Yeah.
Let's see, a quiet observation of the triumphs and defeats of daily life, along with the poetry evident in its smallest details. Oh my gosh, it's the same movie.
That? Who said that?
It's just the IMDb thing.
Is that a blurb or is that just, oh my gosh. All right.
IMDb blurb.
Patterson's coming up. Love it. Thank you for listening. You can follow us, share us, and review us. Opinion Havers, wherever podcasts are found. You can yell at us at Opinion Havers on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and behold our memes. Once again, thank you for listening. Until next time, watch movies
and have opinions.
they always kill the dog off at the end, you know, and that's how they get you. This movie's like, let's start with that, and then up the ante from there.